Published in 1968, Zelazny's novel Lord of Light introduced readers to a mind-boggling technocracy, ruled by beings with names and attributes taken from the Hindu pantheon and utilizing a technology so advanced they were unto gods. Lord of Light's plot follows the renegade Mahasamatman, or Sam for short, and his efforts to rebel against his fellow gods by delivering their divine technology to the masses. Sam's revolution spans centuries and skips in and out of storylines reminiscent of ancient Sanskrit texts. But through it all, Zelazny's rather cagey with his storytelling, and the reader's never certain if they are visiting a culture in our ancient past or a distant planet far into the future. The book garnered Zelazny a Hugo and Nebula Award and eventually caught the attention of sci-fi and comic book fanatic Ira Geller. Geller was a would-be screenwriter and film producer with a head full of big dreams to rival those of Kirby and Zelazny put together. Purchasing the book rights, Geller adapted his own screenplay and conceived of an outrageous marketing plan. Lord of Light would start life as a theme park. With the help of some deep-pocketed financiers, Geller planned to build an amusement park in Aurora, Colorado he dubbed Science Fiction Land. His strategy was twofold. Park ticket sales would go toward financing the film, while the park environment itself would stand for the film set for Lord of Light. Science Fiction Land would be a futurist world's fair, a sci-fi kaleidoscope where scientists could come together to tout their latest technologies beside giant Ferris wheels and maglev roller coasters, all beneath a mile-high Buckminster Fuller geodesic dome. Geller enlisted luminaries like author Ray Bradbury and designer Paolo Soleri to lay the foundations, but he turned to Jack Kirby to design the park's cosmic architecture. And design Kirby did. The projected layout of Science Fiction Land would engulf nearly 200 acres of Colorado prairie land and cost an estimated $500
It was like about 43 years ago when I called up Jack to design the buildings of Science Fiction Land. That was what I called the theme park. And at that time, all I had was set designs and a screenplay of sorts, turned to the man that I thought was the only person who could design the theme parks that I wanted, the rides that I wanted, the buildings that I wanted, work it into the technology that I had a vision for. And so that's what I went to him for. And I said, let's change the world. And we started doing theme park. We started doing the intense analysis of what would really work. Would a god do this? How would the city look? What would this? What would that? And all of that was towards the development of buildings and sets, as far as that goes. And for all these years, when it fell apart, because we had a mayor and a few city councilmen and another production guy, they all wanted their own zip code, and they got caught. and then I was sort of like PTSD for the next 35 years. I just wasn't here. And I did a company. I had a successful software development company. But, I was always walking around going, what am I doing here? And that's when I started to show up again at the science Comic-Cons and everything, and got back in touch with some of the people I knew then, although none of the people that I've known, they weren't hanging around Jack. I was hanging around with him between, the last 15 years of his life, all the holidays and things like this, and we would hang out together. He was like a father to me. But that's been said before. So that's where I'm at right now. I believe I've recovered with the help of Brian Chidester, actually, who started to get me going to look at my boxes. I had all these boxes in storage. And I finally, it's like someone had chopped off not just one arm, but both arms and maybe one leg. And for the last 35 years, I've been hopping around going, what's going on? And I finally, I'm glad to meet myself again. And it feels like, I feel like I'm coming out of a Ray Bradbury short story where one of his short stories, he had a guy opens and he was left on a planet and he gets a phone call. Who could be calling him? Well, it was himself 30 years earlier playing a joke.
Is your refrigerator running?
How's it going? And but in fact, as I look over this materials, and I'm going to share some of it that I have never shared before, because I didn't even know where it was. I was sort of, well, not Barry. And so that's what I'm going to expose and talk about and show that Jack Kirby and our little group of guys, we were just a bunch of kids. And it was very unfortunate that it didn't happen, but here we are. And I believe I can not build it again, but can bring back all the work that I plan to do with Jack and the other people as far as that goes. So when I called Jack, I was talking about statues for a theme park. And I had these ideas for the film, Lord of Light, and I had sets at the time. And basically, everything Jack had created in the past exploded into our designs. And but the difference was, he was absolutely free to envision and do whatever he wanted to do. And I would then shovel drawings at him with holographic buildings and magnetically levitating cars. Paolo Soleri, the famous architect, entered. And of course, he was a consultant as far as arcology goes. It wasn't comics anymore, and never, ever was. This is the Bronx, and Tremont Avenue. I'm going to spend just about 2 minutes. The milieu that I grew up, I'm 73 now, and I have a 25-year plan, and mostly to do inventions, drawings, and things like this. And I hope everyone continues with me. It really is Tremont Avenue. Now, this is what I was reading at the candy store. And I didn't know that Jack had drew a lot of them, and it's just somehow changed me. It's very hard to explain, but so out of nowhere, quote unquote, I was very interested in science, and I started writing papers at 12 or 13 in physics, enough to win some science fairs in New York. Thanks to my mom, who saved those things. You know, moms are good. And bing, I read Galactus on the newsstand. You know, and later that year, my father, who had a whole house of hardcover books, marched me to some store and said, "You got to sell your comics, son, because they're gonna hurt your mind. And I was too afraid to tell him that my mind was already gone. Somewhere in between college, I founded. What happened to that? the crash of 1971, all my friends, we all lost our shirts. And that was the end. I continued to develop ideas that I had as far as wavelength, quantum wavelength materials. I was still hooked on science, and I started to write science fiction and tried to sell it. No one wanted science fiction in the mid-'70s when I went to film school. And so I got a job as a reader associate producer, and I'm working there for 1977, a famous writer-producer, had 2 #1 shows, the best place to become a television producer, and Star Wars came out. The publishers in New York, and they had no idea that the world had just changed. But I did. I bought the rights, The Lord of Light, quit my job, which, who knows? So essentially, I started working with Ray, I started working with John Chambers, Buckminster Fuller, Paolo Soleri, and I would show them Jack's designs, his drawings. Everyone would just freak out. They loved it because they saw the man, they saw him as an architect. They were inspired. Now, we're talking about some of the biggest scientists in the world at that time. You know, if I had called them up without Jack, hi, I'm Ira Geller. With Jack embodying my ideas and plans, and we become partners, everything started to move ahead. To me, I could not, at the time, have gone to anybody else. There was just no question in my mind, even though I hadn't been into comics at all since the last stuff I read on the newsstands. My mind was still blown from those montages that he put into, what was it, issue 48 or 49? And I was still blown out. So I called him up, just like that. And I started talking to him. Here's what I want to do. Jack's going, I had no idea what he had been doing in the last 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years. I'll read a part of this. Everything Jack had created in the past exploded into our designs, and he was completely free to envision the absolute most fantastic, grandest architectural plans ever thought of at that time. This is what I called the northeast corner of heaven. It was based on ideas that I had been studying on Indian architecture. This is the book on Indian architecture. Actually, it's Tibetan architecture that basically is designed so that a person, a monk, or goes through various forms of meditation in their religion, and each one of those layers is a form of or level of consciousness. The Hebrew Kabbalah is exactly the same. On the inside, he holds court. This is Brahma, where the great chief spends a good deal of his time, and on the inside, he holds court in the vast spherical chamber where he levitates high in the center, resting on his plastifoam-covered electronic throne called Naga, which is a great snake. Like ribs, statues of many gods and goddesses jut out from the walls. To speak with Brahma, a god must enter through that passageway high up in the center wall. In an emergency, God can always be reached by phone. There's he's levitating, and we're going to get into those people down there, 100 feet down or so. This is the comment that Roz gave me, or said to Jack, well, geez, he's really into snakes. So, but this is the Raga throne, the Naga throne, and it's my one of my most favorites. It's just, well, you'll see what Wally Anne has done. It's housed and launched NASA, remember 1978, so I'm talking 1978. A NASA-type complex. The Thunder Chariot is equipped with the latest laser, tractor beam, and repeller electronic weapons, and uses a combination of anti-grav and jet power. On the exterior of the building, there is a tier upon tier of colored quartz, color quartz panels. As the Thunder Chariot is energized, the colors of the panels change until they reach high oscillation, and the Thunder Chariot is launched. And there you have it again. This is actually very closely defined in Roger's book. Although he didn't have it this way, he just sort of described it. And this is how I saw it, and that's how Jack drew it. I'm still amazed when I look at these drawings, because these drawings were the beginning of another civilization that just never happened. You know, it took 40 years for some of the inventions that we were talking about. Now it's modern day. So this is, you can see the date, September 5th, 1978. After our meetings, I gave him the title of in charge of exterior design for both Science Fiction Land and the film. Put $1 million, the plan was, because we were talking to people who had $400 million. You know, I still, in fact, give the Kirby estate the same exact money or figure that I gave them. I'm very happy that I reached my goal, is to get Jack known that his drawings and our designs saved those people's lives. It's not hard of a thing to say, but unfortunately, since it wasn't comics, I think there's been a paucity of information about what the values that Jack really had done and that I really was doing with Jack. And that's what I'm going to come out with, and more and more and more. Jack Kirby, architect of science fiction. The CIA, imagine that. How did the CIA get my designs and script? John Chambers, for many years, was the makeup man for the CIA. He would tell us stories, you know, when we have production meetings. Brando, oh, I can make Brando look real thin and make him younger, blah, blah, blah. And he'd say, on one meeting, he said, hey, I do this for the CIA. And 2 or 3 of us, we all looked at him and go, yeah, right, John. So, but that's how they got it. When I ran into trouble, as Zelazny would put it, the fit hit the Sean. And John just picked up what I had given him and said, look, let's do it this way, because these are Eastern type of designs. The script takes place in India, and here we are. That's really what happened. Who can say this? And I'm saying that we can never forget that Jack Kirby's drawings saved 6 American lives. Not to mention what would have happened if they were killed. This is what I handed out at the press release that ended up in the CIA's thing as well. I did a coloring contest, you know, whatever. The CIA got this and they changed everything to Argo. They saved 6 people's lives. It's, you know, could have been my brother or yours. Here's where we are today. The Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. On my left, there's my script or my adaptation. It says Argo. And on the right, there's one of the designs called Terminal of the Gods. The real focus, though, was building a theme park. There was too much focus on the Lord of Light as the activity, when in fact, Cole got it really correct. The man who introduced us in the beginning. He basically said it the right way. Is that the film was being financed by bringing in vendors from around the world, which started with AM and their dome. Now I want to show what the colorist did with that same thing we saw. The most amazing thing, additionally, had the great fortune of running into David Coons here, who said, and he managed, I mean, we're going to ask him later, but he managed, at least from my perception, to filter out the gold and bring it back in. And I like to get others' opinion of how he really did that, because I have been told it was impossible. And I'm very happy to see him as an artist. Did you want to say anything, David?
Well, this is a classic problem, how one lights and photographs not only color, but specularly interesting compounds like gold, silver, copper, metallics, brass, bronze, how to make them look different. It's been a classic problem in rendering as well. And the simple capture of this really requires something of a broad spectrum light, and also requires capturing it separately, because you can't really see it right. A lot of metallic pieces shimmer in a way where they look great with the reflection, but the color doesn't look very good. It has glossy reflections where they don't belong. So this is a combination of two different acquisitions. One to show the color perfectly, and the other to show the gold. Well, it's hard to see without zooming way in on it. I'd probably do that on my
zoom a little bit more, please. Annie really envisioned Brahma. And who wouldn't envision the gods, as far as I saw it, in gold? So there's a lot to be said why she did this or approached this. Did you want to say something, Annie, about how you saw?
I figured that the character of Brahma would, when people come to meet him, he would be like a blinding kind of force. He would be brighter, higher, more magnificent than anyone, because he uses his power to manipulate his position and what he wants accomplished in the universe. And he is an approachable but still very daunting character. He has all these abilities. He has wealth. Look, he's Brahma. So, well, what he has going for him is, in short, everything, and that includes the gelts, the shimmering effect of his magnificence. And I really wanted to reflect that.
Question for David Coons. You were about to talk about it, but did you actually create a filter that created these wavelengths of solidity on an orange background? How did you do it?
Well, what's really happening here is trying to do RGB right, which is hard to do because there's so many false lighting systems. I wouldn't say bad, just not rich, not broad spectrum. People toss around the words broad spectrum, but what it really means is that you've got an equal sampling of all the wavelengths in the visible rainbow between 400 and 700 nanometers. Typically, people are using fluorescents, which have a mercury line here and a green and a blue line. It tends to make things look all greenish when photographed with regular cameras. There are lighting systems that do different things, like LEDs. These ceiling lights, for example, are cheap Home Depot LEDs. But for proofing, I use better ones. And the white LEDs have a blue spike, huge, giant blue spike. Now that's not terrible for shooting something like gold, but it's awful when you're trying to capture color in general and trying to separate yellows from golds and things. The gold is essentially kind of a yellowish color, yellowish
Mm-hmm.
red, but not from every angle. See, that's the trick about gold. It looks gold because it's being illuminated in different ways by the light, different angles of attack
Right.
between the light and the camera view. So it has that look to it that you can always identify when you look at a gold coin or something. You know it's not a plastic yellow coin. Even if it
Mm-hmm.
were silver that had been dipped in yellow dye of exactly the right hue, you'd know because you know what it looks like when gold is tilted to the light. You have a sense
Mm-hmm.
for the reddish qualities, the spectrum shifts that happen. It's very subtle, but it's something we've embedded in our human visual system.
That's
Our
correct.
brain.
Yes.
So it's something that has to be captured correctly and robustly, or else go home. The difficulty, of course, is because we're always using these RGB kind of cameras. The typical ailment of the system to get the best color out of one of these really requires using, there are filters that are built in, but also broad spectrum enough lights that, it doesn't suck. These lights are actually a combination of several different colors. We've got violet and blue, and then violet plus phosphor and blue plus phosphor. Those 4 different combinations. And what that
Wow.
gives you is a better broad spectrum without having to go to tungsten, which I believe is, of course, the killer app. But I'm going to use tungsten in my new scanner. But look at this. That's a tungsten light.
Wow.
It's almost unheard of anymore in architecture.
Yeah.
Banned, by the Code Enforcement Bureau. They will come in and seize your home if you use these in new construction. But
Wow.
so what some people do is they'll literally, they'll put in the approved lighting, which is of course solid state nowadays, and then they'll pull it all out and put these in afterwards. And they don't like you to do this to the extent they've changed the fixture style. So you won't find this fixture style anymore in the approved lighting fixtures. It doesn't require a good lens, but I'm going to use a good lens for the next phase of this to get beyond RGB. RGB filters typically are these things.
Oh my.
4725. These are the classic ones from the 1940s and 50s. Kodak used to make these. They've long since discontinued them in that variety. They've made a new batch which has slightly different color. Those are what I've been using. And those actually, at least in the conventional scanners that I've been using, and those actually separate color very well. They don't have to abide by the physics constraints that regular RGB in-camera filters have to abide by. Like they have to have similar transmission, identical transmission. Red, green, and blue have to end up with the same number of electrons in each well with the same exposure time, whereas these color filters from Kodak, you could expose the blue twice as long. It was actually a stop or 2 darker than the green, and that gave a better color response. So in terms of RGB scanning, that's the best you can do.
Yes, and I have a question. The gold or the metallics are outside of the human perception color range, and you filtered them back in, which is maybe wrong, but a good enough.
No, that's kind of putting it right. I mean, outside the human range also includes luminance as well as color, and as you know, glossy, shiny things tend to get very much brighter than the white we want to the extent they overexpose. So the point is to overexpose intelligently.
When you were doing that, don't mind me interrupting. When you were doing that, I noticed he had a gun shooting white light, and he would just do it in the air around under that camera. And he said, "Don't move. The air will shift the color range." And to me, when I look at the results of his, I don't know what to call it. If I'm looking at now, if Jack Kirby looked at this, let's say he was because that's what we hear. I believe each one of us are expanding, moving Jack's work into the next world. And this, to me, has part of the vision that Jack would have done.
I think he would have enjoyed the idea that you're taking it out of a standard kind of spectrum into something more newfangled.
Yes.
And that's comic book art for you. I mean, if you look at standard colors, they're pretty drab, right? I mean, this is from a Rescuers Down Under movie. These things, and they're very drab colors on the screen. They were also fairly drab, just because of the way film renders color, and this film wasn't a particularly colorful film anyway. Aladdin was, and it had a lot of really bright colors in it that showed up, but you don't really get much out of the spectrum of a color photographic process. And what I'm trying to do to address that, I got these out to show you. These are color filters that hopefully will.
We'll come back.
Wow.
See, these are these are CIE filters.
Wow.
So what Barry's talking about is the two things. He's talking about the errors that can occur when errors can occur simply because you're not sampling them correctly.
Wow.
The thing to do is to take these, these XYZ functions that the French Commission years ago stipulated. It's actually no offense, Wally, but the average middle-aged white American male had a specific color spectrum sensitivity, and that's what they used. And so that was, I guess, the preponderance of the audience that goes to Comic-Con. That's what defines those filters, and that's how we'll be scanning fluorescence in the future. And as you know, a lot of this work that you're coloring is containing some very bright colors, and I'm actually enamored with your colors. Look at this. I have a lot of color stuff that comes through here that's fairly it's Rodman. But look at those reds. Some artists sort of have this thing about color. They use fluorescence and things, and they want to get outside the spectrum.
Wow.
I can't scan this. I cannot scan this yet.
Wow.
It's impossible with this RGB built-in camera on this laptop to appreciate how bright and rich and vibrant these colors are at the risk of closing my laptop again. But look at this.
Wow.
They really pop. And
great.
I don't have your artwork in front of me, unfortunately, to juxtapose, but
that's beautiful.
What about fluorescence? They emit, like your colors, they're emitting more energy than they absorb. And this is emitting more green than the white is. So you get a lot of, and these are standard fluorescent colors.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Bless your heart, Wally. This is awesome stuff you've done.
I think so too. And
Thanks.
it's beyond. And it's like the thing you just said. What was that again? Just going back a little bit.
He was talking about fluorescence and the way we look at colors.
Yeah, the way they emit more energy than they receive.
Yeah.
Kind of like Jupiter emits more energy than it receives from the sun.
Okay.
That's why we call it a second sun almost.
Think about that. Think about it. I was asking about how you saw developing the functionality just like that, and you said something along these lines that you felt guidance coming from the lines. Can you elaborate also on that?
Oh, absolutely. And if you notice, in a lot of Kirby's architecture, there are a lot of light sources. There are beams of light. There are all kinds of apparatus, there's that word again, that illuminate a certain part of the print, or they're illuminating a pathway that people are traversing. And so I would try to really zero in on the functionality and what sort of purpose would it serve. And his lines will tell you that. They will. You'll see, like, if you see a light at the top of a certain structure, you know that it is supposed to illuminate something. If only the sky, it is supposed to be illuminating.
And you can look at this. Here's another drawing. The vibrations are unbelievable, and that's exactly what you're describing to me, that you extract the energy. And so that's why I think you're very important. Your work is so important, David, because you're bringing out what the artist's perception, unconsciously maybe, or superconsciously, you are able. I've seen his camera. It's something he's building. It'll be the biggest camera on the planet. Best, not biggest. But, that's...
It is going to be the biggest. It's 5 by 8 feet.
That's why I want you to marry with the Jack Kirby Museum. This is one of the most amazing drawings that I've seen that Jack had done. The first color edition. I saw, if we can zoom in just a little, in all the years that I have had this drawing, I always thought the elephants were statues, not true. Annie, Wally, would you want to elaborate?
Well, to me, there's so much movement in this print. Everyone's going somewhere. There's all these transport systems and everything that the elephants and the people on top of them and the soldiers, they're part of a major kind of exodus. They're going somewhere and they're lined up and they're on display for any number of reasons. And I felt that they were living, they were alive, rather than in statuary form. They seemed alive to me.
Tom, after scanning 20,000 drawings for the Jack Kirby Museum, have you ever seen any drawings like this before?
I don't think so, no. Not like this, of course.
And that is what this panel is about. An undiscovered master architect. In a few minutes, you'll see even more about it. But that's I didn't know that you were gonna, I was actually expecting you to say, well, maybe this, maybe that. But that's why you're the president of the Jack Kirby Museum. And so, yes, they're alive.
Oh, that's great. I love what David is posting up there. That's great.
Brian.
Yeah. You want to ask me something?
Oh, no, it's just, I meant, not particularly, but at this moment, but I wanted to see if you had, thoughts.
Not specifically. I'm just enjoying hearing everybody. I'm not how can I say, I'm not a positivist or a critic, so I'm more of a creative historian. I'm interested more in kind of the background, the geopolitics, the cultural appropriation involved in this, and your vision in particular. So, what I'm really interested in as a filmmaker and historian is kind of pulling back the curtain and seeing what you wanted to do with it.
That's the story behind the story.
The story behind it, right?
Yes, Mike.
I have a question. The elephants that we were just discussing, are they in the book? Then I want to
My screen.
say that I have always felt that everything that Jack created, his mind was this hard drive, and everything that he experienced in his entire life was in there. And he had the ability to defrag it instantly and pull out something that had been placed in there years ago. And who can say that when he was very young, he didn't go to a screening, it had to be a reissue of a film like Intolerance that had these massive, massive sets.
Wow.
That had several layers, one of which had elephants on it.
Really?
Everything was practical.
And it's just, I think everything Jack created had something to do with his life experiences. And he may have seen this at some point in his life in a photograph, in a book on history of silent films or anything. And it just, without him consciously thinking about it, the computer spit it out. Or I need to go into therapy. I don't know.
No, that's
I'll be.
There's a life. There's a life to everything that Jack drew. It is alive, and I think that's why it is, even as hard as I tried on doing the back views of a couple of the figurines, is that
right.
Nobody can think the way Jack did.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it is hard to fake Jack. from whole cloth. It's just, he was such an original.
Won't go into
Yeah. Great.
Now, there are a number of different depth cue faux tricks you can do, including putting warmer colors forward, kind of in the order of the rainbow. So when viewed with holographic glasses, the bluish colors retard into the background, and the oranges in the middle, then yellows, followed by red in the far foreground. And some people have shown me art that had been done accidentally this way, and it was quite the sight to behold with the holographic.
Wait till I show you. This is it. Okay, let's do the fly around, Jim.
Okay.
This material, ever since Barry showed this to me initially, was ideal for some kind of 3D stereoscopic reconstruction in much the same flavor, I suppose, that they do for the movies these days, where they're largely shot in 2D and then extracted it out in 3D.
No, bring it back.
And let me put it into a loop mode.
Yes.
Obviously, we're created in 2 dimensions, but there's so much that can be done these days in terms of bringing out depth and creating depth with artists, deciding what's in front of what, basically, creating layers
and bring it closer. We tried several ways of doing this, and this is actually the easiest way. The other ways weren't predictable. On your lower right, stop right there, and we begin to keep moving, a little bit. Good, stop there. Do you notice those people? Of course you notice them, but where the point of view is about 100 feet up. Imagine, where's this is what I've noticed. Imagine where you are, like 100 feet away. What's the point of view? How am I standing up in air, looking down at Brahma? But I'm not looking down at Brahma. I'm looking at all the way down, and at the same time adjusting my eyes to the snake and hand.
Yeah.
Continue, Jim. Next. Here we can show this. This is. Look at that. And down. And the colors brought this out. This is the first phase. The second phase will be with the Photoshop master, and but maybe I think though we're gonna go right into some holographic, imaginatory revelations, with just the way it is. But we're gonna see. Okay, next. Notice the people all the way down.
Can you just imagine if this were realized fully, how incredibly impressive and mind-blowing from Jack's drawings, that a person might dismiss them as just simple drawings, but when you really get into them, and the point of view of some of these things, and the sizes of, what an incredible, fantastic thing science fiction land would be.
Can you imagine?
And the fact that he just sat at the drawing board, and after you conferenced together on what needed to be there and what you'd like to see,
I'd come back 3 days later.
I'm just reminded of what Dr. Frankenstein says in Young Frankenstein. It could work.
Yep.
But also, can you imagine if this was made into a 3D environment model, and
you
had a headset on, and you could actually walk through and look straight up and actually walk around.
You could fly through it. You could fly through it like Cameron did during Avatar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this rendered as a
That's
3D
what's
model would be quite stunning, I think. Then you could include all the atmospherics, but you tend to get away from the comic book look when you go that far.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's the point. I was about to say we're on the same. We're not only on the same page. We're in the same paragraph. What I was about to say is this again has nothing to do with comics at all, but it's Jack Kirby discovering a new topic, a new part of his life. Comics was over. He conquered comics. That's it. When I was there, he wasn't too happy with Stan, who just had Stan Lee's Silver Surfer come out. But I'm not gonna. That's not what this panel is about. It's about this, about the vision that we were doing together, and then Paolo Soleri would look at it, and then Ray Bradbury would look at it, and so it went on. I mean, Paolo Soleri, and then Bucky Fuller. When we were looking at this, let's go to the next one.
But Barry,
Yes.
so how did it tie into actual science? Were you thinking that some of these pavilions were representing either like the pseudoscience of spiritual tradition, or was it more like natural history that we're, where we're able to sort of visit these other lands and their traditions?
Good question.
Because it's so intermixed between the science and spirituality.
Let me answer it. That's a very good question. It's science. Remember, the year is 1978. No computers. Nothing. It's all envisioned to happen. So in 1978, what Jack and I were talking about was transforming concepts into new science. So it's science and science fiction. How hard, I can't tell you how many doors closed in my face when I was a writer trying to push science fiction in the mid-70s. Give me a break. But again, I'm here now, and the other part of your answer, just there, is a kind of development that I was showing to other scientists. Howard Hughes was my hero. I loved the fact that he had hired 400 scientists and just funded it and said, "Go to work, boys." Maybe it was 40. I don't know. But can't remember everything. But that's what I wanted to do. I had the Science Fiction Foundation, and it's on the Science Fiction Land website, a little breakdown, but there's going to be a big, I'm now going to upgrade everything to bring out all these documents. But the other part of it, the reason it was science, is because I want to fund new technologies on an entertainment basis, and that's what's so important. Does anybody remember the film The Formula? Well, it's about someone who does these inventions, and someone buys them and puts them on the shelf, just like some favorite movies, and that get done that way. And I decided that I wanted to have. I made this decision. I want the top guys in industry to buy the whole thing that we developed and put it on display so people can experience future technology now. I didn't, it's so funny because you talk to an engineers at that time, and I say, well, I want to do magnetic levitation, and I wanted to do this, and just Japan is doing it, blah, 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 blah. And the guy would say, well, we can't do that because all these problems. I said, dude, I'm only going a few miles. I just need to fake it. It's only a few miles to the airport, man. and that's, you see that thing coming out of the tube that comes out of the Terminal of the Gods, and that's going to the airport, McLaren Airport there. And so same thing when I was in Montreal, we're doing the same thing. But that's your answer, and it's a damn good question, because my others I'm asking, is it science? Is it science fiction? Well, what do you call having inventions like holography that are buildings that people think are really big buildings? I had the man to do it, and thought I was going to get the money. So, next.
Call it magic.
I have a question. I have a question for Barry.
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you regard the differences or comparisons between rendering a theme park, a science fiction land, in real brick and mortar, as was Disney World, carved out of a vacant section of Florida, and a virtualized world, which of course has its own advantages, its own look, and its own audience?
Well, I think there's something called, again, great question, because there's something that's taken years to finally get developed. It's called VR and XR, where you're wearing the glasses and you have a whole rendered environment that you're suddenly in. That's the difference. We're in, and that's what I want to do, build a virtual science fiction land. I don't have $2 billion to do it anymore. You know, Disney spent $1 million for one of its presentation models, and I spent $50,000. And I, you know, what is there to do? You see, it's actually, it's easier if you really know what you're doing, or have an idea what you want to do, and you have Jack Kirby, and you have the rest of the people that all just came together. But that's the answer. I can see that now. We can all get on glasses and have science fiction land in the game.
Yeah.
Now, where holography, they were in a room and they actually had the whole environment, and there they was. It was just a real AR experience, and I'm forgetting the name. It was a bunch of stories, and that got filmed.
Are these just cues, James, that you're going to later lay in actual scans with real pans of?
Hello? That is what do you mean? That's an After Effect little clip that I did in the middle of the night last night. So
This is the crowning achievement that I think, crowning achievement of Jack and mine. This is his crowning achievement. These drawings, and there's just, it just goes beyond. Look at that. You look down. Again, stop right there, and you see the perspective. And you look on the side. Can we fly on the side a little bit?
I got a loop running, so hold on a second. Loop up, and I got to move it.
This is the first time wherever, stop there, or whatever.
Yep.
But you see, that's perfect.
People there.
Look
People
at that.
People there.
Same 100 foot. What am I doing in the air 100 feet away from that building? And the closer I get, I'm still flying in the air in this invisible point of view that's perfectly architecturally structured. And I think by the color, in my opinion, brings that out. But we never really looked at these drawings. Yeah, we'll continue on that to the very end. But you see, there's her C on the far right. And it's the same perspective. Look at the building that goes down. This is not done by accident.
Barry?
Yes.
Is Tom still on with us?
He dropped and then he came back. Yeah.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
I know you said that there wasn't this level of depth or this level of architecture in the Kirby comics, but I'm wondering about those Mayan ziggurats and things that Jack was developing privately, kind of 74, 75, 76, and how you might think they relate to this or are kind of a precursor. And maybe
Well, just backing up a little bit, the only thing I think is similar is the Eternals. When he was drawing the structures of the Mayan, the Mayan plateau and all that, kind of has that feel to it. But there's never been, I don't think he's ever drawn an architectural drawing in a comic book like this. That's kind of what I meant. He's definitely drawn like panoramic, incredible vista views of structures and so forth.
But his interest in the Mayan traditions and some of they go back to non-comics stuff, right? Were those?
Oh, sure.
And what was how did he get interested in that? Was he reading like Von Daniken or?
He was reading so many different things. He was he was reading a lot of pulps in the 30s and 20s even and 40s, and they had a lot of fantasy kind of. I don't know if it was Mayan, but definitely fantasy worlds and places and a lot of science fiction. So I think a lot of everything kind of went into this, like Barry, like Mike was saying about him having a hard drive. I think he was really good at taking so many different things, different cultures, different ideas, concepts that he read. He used to read a lot, and put that all together into something truly new.
Mm.
I'll add that Van Daniken, I believe, was the basis for his story, the Eternals. Generally, it just sort of expired. That the idea that.
You mean Chariots of the Gods?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the idea that people come in, start a civilization, leave it, manipulate it, pretty much like I would incubate a bunch of eggs or hummingbirds from a distance. Oh yeah, how they doing? All right, and which I believe. I don't know if we can go back to.
Can I just ask Brian a question?
Sure.
So Brian, what were you asking at the beginning of your question to me? What comic book series were you talking about?
No, I wasn't necessarily talking about a comic book series. I was talking about some of those Mayan influenced drawings that Kirby did in 74, 75. I think there's been prints over the years and maybe even the...
Oh, right. Yes, of course. Yeah, the colored ones that he colored himself. Right.
I mean, where was the influence of those, or what was the impetus? I know he also, in one of the Kirby fanzines, they showed some of his 1972, 73 drawings of like Old Testament or Hebrew prophets. So
right. Yep.
I mean, there's a world religion interest that's growing alongside of already the Marvel mythological figures that got brought back in, and then the new gods. And so he has this almost like Joseph Campbell fascination that is beyond just Von Daniken. It's like he's really interested in world religion. And it seems to me that the Mayan thing and all of that interest kind of comes to bear, and it sort of explodes on these drawings.
I also see an influence of like Egyptian, a lot of Egyptian in this too.
Yeah, Mesopotamian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, those I don't know if everyone knows what they are, but I think it was called Inca Visitation or something. It was a beautiful poster of this all in color. Jack did the coloring, I believe, himself, and it was just incredible. Showing this huge spaceship landing, kind of like in this, landing on Earth, basically. And that was done, I think, in 73.
The technology Dream that you have been printing with the museum.
Yeah, the Dream Machine. Yep.
Dream Machine. Yeah, those three seem to be all kind of interrelated and almost kind of are a precursor to what Jack and Barry did together.
Fantastic. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about how that works for you and a little bit more of that process itself?
Quite often I would color in categories. Like if there was a lot of like a natural scene with forest, trees, water, sky, I would do all of that. And I would leave more of the detailed coloring, the really phantasmagorical designs. I would leave those sections of the print towards the end. In other words, I would surround the most intricate part of the print with all the other color first. And doing that would also lead me to the correct colors, the correct color usage for the most detailed parts of the prints. Also, I would determine, as I think I wrote you in an email one time, a lot of my process in coloring these prints depends on function and fascination. What would look fascinating, but also I would try to keep the function of a structure in mind as well. Like if you see something's a lookout tower, or you see something is shows people manning controls or whatever, you think about that, and you think about, well, they have to see something that's happening technically, and they're trying to control that. They're trying to like help a plane fly or help land a plane, or they're trying to control a crowd down below. You want their apparatuses, what surrounds them, to make sense. Even in a total fantasy land, it still has to make sense. Like if you see there's a big, huge window, you want to make it look like glass. You know, you could do a weird color, but that perhaps wouldn't convey the purpose of that building.
Hold on one second.
It's my favorite too.
I want to just insert this again. Was the right color was created by Unbox Toys, and that was their first model. So Annie colored their color, but everything else is hers. But you can see the Mayan Inca influences here.
Yeah. And
Definitely.
That was the first thing we started, and the first thing that we did. And
Well, when Jack's pencils first came to my drawing board, and all Jack told me about was, this is not for comic books. This is something else. The checks will be coming from someone else. And I just looked at him, and it just blew me away. And I had the same reaction on anything I ever inked for Jack, is don't screw it up, Mike.
Don't worry, you didn't.
and I don't think at the time I ever put any thought into what kind of civilizations or religious, philosophical things may have been input into these drawings. They just impressed the living K-Pock out of me.
Mhm.
And how many years was it before I knew what this was all about? When did we meet, Barry?
that
It had to be 20, at least 20 years later.
yes, it was. I think I started coming to Comic Cons. I think we met somewhere around when I was had my software company, and I had at that time I was selling my patents.
Well, did Tom introduce us?
I don't think so.
No, I think you were sitting there, and I came up, and I went, "Hi," and you and you said, "Hi," and then we started doing panels a number of years later, where we really discovered each other. It's sort of Mike and I have this Rain Man kind of relationship. I didn't know it was him, until much later. Of course, Jack knew how to keep secrets and keep quiet about material. Anyway, I'm just answering that. So I think this is, again, there's a toy. Let me see. Go one step further. Can you do that, Jim? Go the next page from this. Oh, look at that. Look at it. It is so great.
That's the model that's the unboxed model.
Yeah, yeah.
it's what the model was based on. There it is.
There he is.
Look at that. Look at that. And that was
Great.
sculpted. And there's Mike's inking.
Yeah.
So you have he's inking a 3D version of the drawing that he inked 40 years earlier.
Right. Right.
How'd you
And it
feel?
really sets off his musculature and everything. It's just fantastic.
Chiaroscuro.
I mean,
Like-
part of what I want to do is have lots of toys like this. Forgive me, I call them toys, but they're collectible. They sold out. A few hundred of them sold out in an hour, all over the world. Bing, gone.
I was curious in regard to that sort of, physical versus virtual version of the science fiction land. In a documentary sort of perspective, from a documentary perspective, how would you tell the story of, say, the building of the park, a physical park, versus the building of a virtual park?
So what I would try to do is use archival footage, first of all, to look at places like Dreamland or Epcot Center or the various World's Fairs, and show also just some of the pulp covers and this world between science fiction and actual science, and also like the interest in spirituality and horror and fantasy and all of that, and then try to build to move closer to something that could be animated through motion graphics, to then finally trying to bring it to life through actual animation so that the viewer could feel like they're actually walking through it. It's not really done that often in documentary films, but I think that's kind of where documentaries are leading. To me, it's getting away from somebody sitting in front of a bookcase pontificating and telling you what to think, and more into let's go behind the curtain of the maker and try to bring the world inside their head to life, and see, almost like Mike was saying, see what databases exist in there, and see how those can be, found in footage and sort of versions outside, and try to bridge the gap between what's in the person's head and what was in the world. So I don't know if that makes sense, but trying to basically look for pre-existing things and then find a way to bring them to life through various available mediums and technologies in filmmaking.
I agree. I mean, I think that's a wonderful way. I think that's what we're here to do, and I maybe would like to talk to Comic-Con about having more of these things. I think we're all about done. Any further comments, or anyone want ask anything, or?
This has been fun. This has been enlightening, and I appreciate all of you guys.
I look forward to seeing a 3D model of the whole thing and being able to fly through it on a drone.
Right.
And
I mean, I will say that that we did. Barry and I were working on an exhibition that before COVID was actually had a venue that was going to show it and everything. So we were going to be able to walk through some of it, and Tom was involved. So hopefully that'll get back on the slate now that things are opening up. And I think that would be a good first volley to start working through some of the materials that would eventually end up in the documentary. So fingers crossed.
Thank you, Barry. This was great.
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you.
Nice.
See you all later.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Take care,
pleasure-
everybody.
Pleasure seeing you.
Have
Bye.
Thanks,
fun gardening, Mike.
Cheers.
Okay,
Good
kick
luck
out.
editing, Jim.
Yeah, that's the
Bye-bye.
fun part.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.